When each hour grinds us with just routine and one day bleeds into next, it feels as though sometimes the life just drains out of us. If that's not your experience, it might be the opposite. Regardless of well-coordinated calendars with spouse and kids and school and work, all it takes is one little thing to blow up your schedule. And it seems to happen every day that something or someone, from the dog getting sick to the sink backing up, leaves us just as depleted and maybe feeling hopeless. Let me get to the point. From one extreme of living like a human doing and not a human being, to the other extreme of feeling uncertain despite our best efforts, and all of the places in between, we are often confronted by how little we have control over our lives. And our desire for control intensifies from being programmed to make the best use of our time, our relationships, our stuff. We're supposed to do the best we can with all these things and to have everything into control, but yet we don't. Since the Ancient of Days, our faith returns us to solid ground, and that's when we can turn to the wisdom of the psalmist. And before I read the psalm, please pray with me. Dear God, send your Spirit among us and these ancient words, and humble us to see your world and our lives as only gifts from you. Inspire us to live in gratitude to you and in the ways in which we live with one another. Amen. I invite you to listen to the first 6 verses of Psalm 24 as I read. The earth is the Lord's and all that is in it, the world and those who live in it. For the Lord has founded it on the seas and established it on the rivers. Who shall ascend to the hill of the Lord, and who shall stand in his holy place? Those who have clean hands and pure hearts, who do not lift up their souls to what is false, and do not swear deceitfully. They will receive blessing from the Lord and vindication from the God of their salvation. Such is the company of those who seek him, those who seek the face of the God of Jacob. Selah. Friends, this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. The designers of the International Space Station conceived of a 7-window dome at one end. I don't know which is up or down when it's the space station, but they conceived of this 7-window dome to allow a view of the station's exterior when they needed to watch the robotic arm or when someone is out doing a spacewalk, and they call it a cupola. As expected from scientists, it was conceived of and put in for a very functional purpose, but it became much more. Before the cupola, space and Earth were visible only from single, small portal-like windows. And one astronaut remarks, "Our favorite places on Earth would flash by in this tiny window so quickly you couldn't take them in. But from the middle of the dome, you have the best window imaginable for looking at our world and the space around." So the cupola expands into a panoramic view. And of course, you're up in the space station, and so therefore the distance dissolves anything that we might think of as national borders, and even the land masses almost merge with the oceans. Astronauts report feeling a cognitive shift as they watch the fragility of our planet below. It's something that the scientists now call orbital perspective. And this renewed perspective shapes them from the moment they arrive at the space station, and they report it continues to influence them long after they've returned to Earth. Once they've seen the Earth from that point of view, it doesn't go back to the limited view they once had. As I was thinking about the cupola, I've also been thinking a lot about those 2 astronauts whose 8-day mission now stretches to at least 8 months if they can return as planned next year. When not working, as they're stranded in space, the mission commander, Sunita Williams, spends her time in the cupola. And she puts this delayed journey into perspective with, I quote, "It's so silly. We take life too seriously on Earth, and we get aggravated with some of the littlest, stupidest things that we really shouldn't, because this is our one planet. To sustain her faith, she carries a sacred Hindu text, the Bhagavad Gita. When I read it long ago, I can say for me it was a study in humility. And before she and her partner, Butch Wilmore, blasted off, they huddled together with ground support to pray because Wilmore is very attentive to his faith on earth. Butch Wilmore told reporters before the flight, quote, "We trust in sovereign God because whatever the plan is, we're ready for it, whatever it might be." Stranded now many months and missing his kids growing up, his wife claims that faith that God is in control gives him and their family great peace. So both astronauts brought their scientific critical thinking and experience to anticipate, to respond, and to carry out their mission. And each of them remains humbled by how little they can control. And each of them nurtures a sense of peace from their respective awe of the divine. That's exactly what this psalmist asks of us, to stop and notice where we are in the world and who we are in the world. And it contains that strange little word that's peppered throughout the Psalms, and we oftentimes don't even say it, and that word is Selah, S-E-L-A-H. It's throughout the Psalms. It's technically a liturgical instruction. And whenever the psalm instructs or contains the word Selah, it asks us to stop and take a moment. Kind of like in our prayer of confession where we're given a time of silence. But Selah means take a moment. Take a moment to consider what you've just heard or said or sung or prayed. Don't just go through the motions or recite the words as an automaton without engaging your heart and mind. For example, here are some of the Psalms. Take a moment to accept your humanity because you can't do this on your own, nor do you have to. Selah. Take a moment because your God deserves this time and you need this time. Selah. Take a moment to seek God as your refuge and strength. Selah. Remember that God is your help. Selah. So certainly the passage we read ends with, and I gave it extra emphasis, Selah, because it's asking us to go back to the beginning of the psalm before we continue to read any further. The first line of the psalm contains the most important and overlooked fact of reality, that everything in existence, everything including you and me, belongs to God. God owns the world. From God's generous heart, God created the world. So when we get so caught up in our attempts to be in control or wrest control from others, this is exactly the time to ponder, to whom do I belong and to whom does this world belong? Take a moment and ponder, do I really think that the world belongs to a roster of nations or to the state? Does it belong to those corporations whose product and smartphones apps count my steps and monitor my time, trying to make my life easier? I feel like sometimes it's in control. The psalm begins as creation began. God is in control. God is the one who overcame chaos and subdued evil at the beginning and still does. Take a moment to realize God's rule derives from creative goodness, not from violent coercion. God creates and never rests from ordering the entire universe to provide a stable existence for us. And then the writer continues, who gets to go see God? Who gets to be in God's presence? And then it immediately answers, people with clean hands, meaning those whose work does not inflict harm on someone else, and those with pure hearts, meaning those whose ethics compel them to think and will themselves to God's desires. This psalm, in just 6 verses, creates a beautiful circle. God gives life and relationship, us and creation, and us and one another. And every day we creatures receive the freedom to live in ways that delight God. We can choose to keep the circular motion and forward movement God initiated unbroken by how we live in harmony with the rest of creation. and God. And God gives us a choice. I have the choice to live as if this is God's expansive world, forever dependent on God, and obliged to participate as one of the multitudes. It is at one time humbling, but also quite liberating. I'm not in control. Or I may doubt God's care, and if so, then I'm going to create a small circle of life that I can control, claim ownership of my possessions. And to do so, I will see others as potential predators. And so I will live a life informed by a perspective that's limited, and I will try to institute rules that I can control. And isn't that where we started this sermon? Exhausted by the human doingness or by the constant anxiety of losing control of calendars, of time, of people and stuff? Selah. The blessings of our lives, indeed our very lives themselves, are gifts from God given for a time and eventually claimed by God in eternity. It's the past we share, the present we shape as stewards of creation, and the future we give to our heirs. Now today we were supposed to be celebrating the conclusion of the Heart of Generosity campaign and celebrate the gifts and commitments that you make to Westminster to fund our 2025 ministry programs. I'll admit last weekend threw a wrench in those plans. We didn't get some communications out. That website was down. We didn't get some pledges in. Last weekend threw a wrench in our plans. Despite a fully inspected fire alarm system and all the work to upgrade our electrical infrastructure, when an aged electrical panel slated for replacement in January, when it failed on a Friday night, our life changed. So praises to the custodial staff and the Upper St. Clair Fire Department for their quick response. Everything, though, about this building felt dark, and we lost all control. Those of us who drove past 2040 Washington Road, meeting this building and the whole campus, felt the jolt of an entirely new perspective. We no longer saw the steeple light the night sky. We no longer saw the building stretching its arms to the community, welcoming everyone into whatever way in which they could build a community here. To me, it looked like an abyss of darkness had fallen alongside the road. Now, thanks be to God, no one was hurt. No one was hurt, nor did the building that supports our ministry suffer extensive damage. Quick work by custodians and the Property Commission led to repairs, inspections, and we turned to the building, and whatever normal might be, we returned to normal on Wednesday. But I don't know that we'll ever think of normal again in the same way. 6:30 in the morning until 9 o'clock at night, this building buzzes. Thanks be to God, it does. Here's where we as a congregation received a blessing of being a part of a larger circle than just ourselves. Temple Emmanuel opened their sanctuary to us. Anyone who worshiped there last week felt their warm hospitality. And hospitality is not just a smile of friendliness. Hospitality means I see you. I see you. I see you in need, and I'm going to give what I can to you. I'm going to feed you. And oh my goodness, they put a spread out and they fed us. They opened their sanctuary so we could worship God in a way that we worship God. People remarked, how could I as a Christian minister stand up at the beam? And I'm like, I've done it before. Other synagogues can do it. We can do it. They did it for us. They gave us the warm hospitality so our kids continued to be taught, and we heard glorious music. So against the backdrop of an election that triggers angst amongst us and the question of who is in control, we felt grounded by their faith and our faith to know that it is God who is in control. And the more we give as God gives to us with generosity and hospitality and risky business of hospitality, the more our world expands. So today is the final Sunday of the Heart of Generosity series. And the events of last weekend serves for us all as a Selah. We can really notice who we are as a ministry and what we mean to this community. And it asks us to really think about how we practice stewardship that focuses on generosity. Yes, it's about raising money, and it's about so much more. Raising money is one aspect of participating in God's creation, but practicing a heart of generosity is about perspective that includes all of what we have, our time, our talent, and our treasure. So going forward, staying as a part of this ever-expansive circle, do we notice Westminster's vital role in the community that so many rely upon? Those who come here for Parkinson's, the youth programs, scouts, music, jam, food drives, counseling. Again, I say our building is open from 6:30 in the morning until 9 at night because so many people rely upon our gracious welcome. Do we rely upon this congregation to nurture our faith and to carry us through the milestones of joys and sorrows? And how do we support Westminster with our thoughts, our hands, our stuff, yes, our money, so that the light of Christ shines in what we do, not just the building, but in what we do? Selah, my friends. Give thanks that God's generous heart controls our lives. And this is your invitation to be a part of that ever-expanding and enduring circle of life. May it be so, my friends. Amen.